Ryder Cup through the 70s before, as you say, GB&I Ryder Cups. It was a huge thing for British players to make those teams.
It was, but it was like lambs to the slaughter. I mean, it was one-way traffic for a long time because we didn't have strength and depth. We had the players you talked about earlier, the great players like the Barnes and the Hortons and Neil Coles and whatever, but we had no real strength at the tail end of the team. So when in 1979 Europe became unified with GB&I, that was the rebirth of the Ryder Cup, and Jacqueline was very much involved shortly after that in where the Ryder Cup is positioned in the game today.
That the Ryder Cup, was that something that at the start of the year that went through your mind? You know, I need to really try and play well because I want to play in the Ryder Cup, or was that not really a goal for you?
It was for me because the Ryder Cup in '81 was at Walton Heath, where I was attached to. I was there for 16 years, and that was my goal for 2 years, was to get in the Ryder Cup side and play at Walton Heath, but it didn't happen.
Let's talk about the change in the Ryder Cup now when the Europeans joined.
Well, you have strength from all over Europe now. You have a unified Europe that are taking on the United States. The first thing they had to do was get results. And in '81, the strongest American team ever came to Walton Heath, and another resounding victory there. Jacqueline changed things around in '83 when he became captain. They came within a whisker at West Palm Beach. '85, the pictures of Sam Torrance. Anyone who plays the game today or has played for that length of time will see Sam with his arms raised and the tears in his eyes. And that day, the Ryder Cup changed because Jacqueline had taken them on with the European Tour players and he'd wiped the floor with them. And he'd changed the mindset of European players. They talk about cashmere sweaters and Concord. That made a big difference because it gave our players an awful lot more belief than they'd previously had.
Sam Torrance was kind of the right person also at the right time. He seems to have sort of made the most out of things like that moment at the Ryder Cup, winning the Ryder Cup when he was the captain, etc.
The winning of that Ryder Cup and the style in which it was done, it was the one that was delayed, sadly, for the atrocities that the United States had over in New York. But Sam coming in 2002 was ideal. A player who had tremendous amount of experience, a man who had great Ryder Cup experience, understood that it was a tough competition, but had to be a fair competition. And Sam was one of the great captains of the Ryder Cup side. And I was thrilled, along with everyone back in Europe, that he would be a winning captain and not a losing captain.
Very passionate man. Very
passionate, and he will be involved in a couple of months' time when they go to Glen Eagles for the Ryder Cup there. Tom Watson at the helm for the United States, and Sam will be a vice captain this time. So very important to have that experience. I think McGinley's made a pretty good choice with Sam and Des Smith.
Do you think it would be unfair for me to say that in the 70s when we were playing, we were completely intimidated by the Americans? And that sort of changed through the 80s and then into the 90s.
We were intimidated, but you could see why. Our tour was 5 months, 6 months long, first prizes of not very much money. More than that, if you finished 5th or 6th, you were just about covering your expenses, maybe making a few bob here and there. The Americans had a great tour then. They had a tour that lasted 10 months of the year. They had big prize funds. So they came from the top table, and we came from the back of the room. So there was a big gulf between the two, but that gulf was to narrow very quickly with the success of the Ryder Cup.
And I think the Ryder Cup was the reason that changed. And not only did it change for the young British players or the European players, it changed for the entire world.
For sure, and you talked about a golden era that the European Tour had. That coincided virtually. We had Seve certainly to start with, and we had Sandy Lyle winning his major championship. But then we had Olafable. Then we had a German called Langer. Who would have said that a German pro would have come and wiped the floor with the players in the United States at Augusta, their hallowed ground? And others started to believe in themselves. Faldo then came on the scene and with his determination and the great successes he had, 6 majors. But it started around that time, and if you look back at the Ryder Cup, when Europe joined forces together, players from all over Europe started to play well. We've got good French players now. We've still got very good Spanish players. We've got young kids coming out of Germany again. Martin Keimer became a major champion, and then it all started from that era in the early 80s.
If I go through those names again, Faldo, Langer, Lyle, Woosie and Seve, just give me your thoughts on each one of them and try and list them in terms of who do you think was the best of the lot.
Well, I'll start at the top. There was only one, Severiano Ballesteros. He was a remarkable player. He had a great connection with people in the game, which I think is so vitally important. You look at the sponsors that put up money today and have done down the years. Very important that the players connect with them. Seve did that better than anyone else. I don't need to say much about his game. 5 major championships. He was the Pied Piper. He was the one who went out there, and everyone looked at Seve and thought, hero, superstar. You know, I want to follow in his footsteps. Woosnam was probably one of the best drivers of a golf ball that I've ever seen, with the old Belata and the persimmon head, which a lot of young players don't understand today. I mean, it wasn't difficult then because that's what we had. But it's a lot easier to play the game today. Woosnam and probably Greg Norman were in a league of their own as far as driving the ball was concerned. And I was thrilled that Woosnam became captain of the Ryder Cup side and made such a great job of it at the K Club in 2006. So Woosnam was a good companion as well. He was a lad you enjoyed playing with. Langer was typical German. He was methodical, calm, great golfer, as he proved down the years, not just with the major championships, but with the amount of tournaments that he won. Nick Faldo was our greatest player, but Nick was Nick on his own and never really got involved with anyone else. It's the way he saw that he could do it successfully. And he did. He did 6 majors in there, a great career, and certainly, without question, Britain's best ever player. Sandy Lyle, lovable, never changed from the day he turned professional. He won the European Open at Turnberry in 1979, his first big victory, and we all know he went on to the dramatics at St George's on his knees at 18, the jig on the last green at Augusta. That was Sandy. I think Sandy's been passed by too many because of his niceness and because of his modesty. But for those who played with Lyle and were fortunate to have him as a friend, I think they're all very fortunate.
Now, you mentioned Sandy Lyle, and he's been overlooked as the captain of the Ryder Cup, which is quite controversial even now, and was very controversial a couple of years ago. Let's talk about Sandy and that issue, but also the fact that Peter Ellis was overlooked and Ewen Murray.
Sandy has been hard done by, there's no doubt about that, and there would have been plenty of times where he could have been a vice-captain and then gone on to be captain. But we talked about the great golden era we've had. We're awash with possible captains. And when you look at the next few years, you've got Padraig Harrington, 3-time major champion. You've got Darren Clarke, Open champion of 11, and they're at just about the same age, mid-40s. If you look at the captaincy, it's in between 45 and maybe 52 or 3. And we have more players coming up after that. We've got Jimenez. I mean, Jimenez would make a good captain, still playing great golf at the age of 50. And I sat down with George O'Grady one evening, we had nothing to do in China, and we looked at the possible Ryder Cup captains, and we had Garcia penciled in for 2029.
So you've got no chance.
You mentioned Peter Ellis. I know he's very bitter about that, very bitter that he didn't get picked as Ryder Cup captain, but in these days, it was different. Captains were captain maybe for 2 or 3 matches. So it wasn't the same nowadays. We see a captain as a one-off. and that wasn't the case when Alice played. But I know he feels he should have been asked, and if you look at his record, he has a strong case.
Now, you laugh when I mention your name, but probably there are very few people who get to see all the players every week as you do.
I've talked to Paul McGinley about this, and Paul asks now and again, you know, how did he play last week? How did he do this week? And you say, well, he's a great putter, he's good cool under pressure, he's a very good driver of the golf ball, because you see a lot of it. And that wouldn't be a job for me, for sure. You have to be much more diplomatic than perhaps I've been over the last few years. But I think Paul McGinley will make a great captain. I do think that role's changed immensely down the years, and it's not so much now about just the matches. It's about all the other things that go on. It's a very busy week.